The little girl had spent 9 years living in a world without sound, but on that bright summer afternoon, she suddenly turned toward the window and smiled as if someone had called her name. Her father froze in the doorway. He had watched the finest doctors shake their heads, spent millions on specialists, flown her across continents, and accepted that his daughter might never hear a single human voice. Yet now, standing in the warm sunlight of their enormous mansion, she was looking directly at a stranger outside and reaching toward him with trembling hands. The stranger was a tired-looking single father carrying a toolbox, and he had no idea that his arrival was about to change the life of the richest family in the city forever. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can change a life and everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. The girl's name was Seraphina Vale, the only child of billionaire Adrian Vale, a man whose name appeared on skyscrapers, hospitals, technology companies, and luxury resorts around the world. To outsiders, Adrian's life looked perfect. He had wealth beyond imagination, a private estate surrounded by gardens, chauffeurs waiting at every entrance, and enough money to solve almost any problem. But inside his enormous home lived a father who felt helpless every morning when he looked at his daughter. Seraphina had been born with profound hearing loss. When she was a baby, Adrian had believed doctors would eventually find an answer. When she reached 2 years old and still did not respond to sounds, he hired specialists. When she turned 5, he funded research programs. By 7, he had built a private medical center dedicated partly to finding new treatments. Nothing worked. Seraphina learned sign language, became an excellent reader, and developed a remarkable ability to understand people through expressions and gestures, but she had never heard rain hitting a window, birds singing in the garden, music at a birthday party, or her father's voice saying that he loved her. Adrian loved his daughter desperately, but his love had slowly become tangled with fear. He became protective to the point of isolation. He hired private teachers, security guards, therapists, and caretakers, yet Seraphina seemed increasingly unhappy. She spent most afternoons sitting beneath the giant oak tree in the garden, watching birds move through the branches. She would place her hand against the tree trunk and close her eyes, imagining what the world might sound like. Adrian often watched her from the window, his heart breaking because he could give her diamonds, houses, vacations, and anything money could buy, but he could not give her the one thing she wanted most. Then came Rowan Mercer. Rowan was 34, a former military engineer who had left the service after losing his wife, Mara, to an illness 2 years earlier. He was raising his 8-year-old son, Kellen, alone in a small rented house on the other side of the city. Rowan had learned the hard way that life did not care about wealth or plans. After Mara died, he stopped chasing promotions and took whatever repair jobs he could find. He fixed air conditioning systems, restored old machinery, repaired generators, and occasionally worked on security equipment. He did not know that one of his ordinary jobs would lead him to the Vale estate on the most important afternoon of his life. The mansion's central garden had been damaged by a powerful summer storm. Several irrigation lines had broken, the outdoor lighting system had failed, and the greenhouse ventilation equipment had stopped working. Rowan was hired for the repairs because the regular maintenance team was unavailable. He arrived in an old gray van wearing faded work clothes, carrying a toolbox that had seen better days. He expected the job to take a few hours. He never expected to meet a billionaire's daughter who would change his understanding of miracles. As Rowan worked beneath the greenhouse roof, Seraphina watched him from a distance. She noticed something unusual. Unlike the other adults around her, Rowan never stared at her with pity. He did not exaggerate his expressions or speak slowly as if she were incapable of understanding. He simply treated her like an ordinary person. When she approached, he smiled and nodded. She pointed toward the broken ventilation motor, and Rowan understood that she was curious. He carefully showed her the damaged part and allowed her to hold the screwdriver. For the first time in months, Seraphina seemed excited. Adrian noticed from the upstairs balcony and immediately became uncomfortable. He had seen too many strangers approach his daughter with hidden motives. He came downstairs and watched closely as Rowan explained the machine through gestures and simple written words. When Seraphina laughed silently, Adrian almost smiled. Almost. Then he saw Rowan reach into his toolbox and remove a small metal tuning device. It had been damaged, but Rowan repaired it and tested it against the greenhouse frame. The vibration traveled through the metal structure. Seraphina placed her fingertips against the frame and suddenly pulled her hand away, startled. Rowan noticed. He tried again, gently placing his palm against the vibrating metal. Seraphina copied him. Her eyes widened. She could not hear the vibration, but she could feel it. Rowan understood something important. He began experimenting with different objects around the greenhouse, creating vibrations that Seraphina could sense through her hands, feet, and even the wooden floor. He turned the experience into a game. For nearly an hour, the billionaire's daughter forgot about doctors, hospitals, and everything she had been told she could never experience. Adrian stood silently nearby, watching his daughter discover something new. But the moment ended when one of the mansion's employees accidentally knocked over a metal tray. The sudden impact created a strong vibration through the floor. Seraphina became frightened and covered her ears instinctively, even though she could not hear the noise. Adrian rushed toward her, but she pushed away from him and ran into the garden. Rowan followed at a respectful distance. He found her sitting beneath the oak tree with tears running down her cheeks. She was angry, confused, and overwhelmed. Rowan sat several feet away and did not touch her. He simply waited. After a few minutes, Seraphina looked at him and signed that she hated being different. Rowan did not know every sign, but he understood enough. He wrote something on a small notepad and handed it to her. The message said, "Different does not mean broken." Seraphina stared at the words for a long time. When Adrian read the note later, he felt something inside him crack. He realized that for years he had been trying to fix his daughter instead of helping her discover the world in the way she experienced it. He had mistaken protection for love. He had built walls around her because he was terrified that life would hurt her, never realizing that the walls themselves were hurting her. The next morning, Adrian asked Rowan to return. Rowan was surprised. He assumed the billionaire wanted to complain about something. Instead, Adrian asked him to help create a sensory garden for Seraphina. Rowan agreed, but he refused to make it another expensive project where people came for a week and disappeared. He wanted Seraphina involved in every decision. Together, they planted flowers that attracted butterflies, installed textured walking paths, built small wooden platforms that transmitted vibrations, and created water features whose movement could be felt through stone. Kellen began coming with his father on weekends. Seraphina initially kept her distance, but Kellen did not treat her like someone fragile. He taught her simple games, and she taught him signs. Soon the three of them became inseparable. The mansion that had once felt silent and empty began to feel alive. Adrian watched from a distance, discovering that his daughter did not need a perfect world. She needed people who would stay. Weeks passed, and Seraphina's confidence grew. Rowan introduced her to vibration-based musical instruments used in sensory education. She could not hear the melodies, but she could feel rhythm through the surfaces. One afternoon, she placed both hands against a large wooden resonance panel while Rowan played a simple rhythm. Her eyes filled with tears. She signed that she could feel something moving inside her chest. Adrian turned away so no one would see him crying. Then, one sunny morning, something extraordinary happened. Seraphina was sitting beside the garden fountain when Rowan activated a small experimental device he had built from parts of the greenhouse equipment. The device transmitted controlled vibrations through a soft band around her wrist. Seraphina closed her eyes. At first, nothing changed. Then her expression suddenly shifted. She opened her eyes and looked toward Rowan. He froze. Seraphina touched her wrist, then pointed toward him. Rowan slowly moved closer. She began crying. Adrian ran from the house when he saw the commotion. He expected another medical emergency, but instead found his daughter trembling with emotion. She pointed at Rowan, then placed her hand against her own throat. Adrian understood. She had sensed something. The doctors were called. Tests followed. The results were complicated. Seraphina had not suddenly gained normal hearing. The device had not magically cured her. But years of therapy, new technology, sensory training, and an unexpected neurological response had opened a tiny pathway of perception that doctors had previously considered almost impossible to access. For the first time in her life, Seraphina could detect certain low-frequency sounds and vibrations. It was not a miracle in the way fairy tales described miracles. It was something better. It was possibility. Months later, Seraphina stood on the stage of a small foundation event organized by Adrian. Hundreds of people were gathered to support programs for children with hearing disabilities. Seraphina did not need a microphone. She signed her message while a translator spoke for her. She explained that she had once believed silence meant loneliness. Then she looked toward Rowan and Kellen sitting in the front row and smiled. She said that sometimes the world does not change all at once. Sometimes one person simply arrives, sits beside you, and shows you another way to experience it. Adrian listened with tears in his eyes. After the event, he approached Rowan and offered him a position managing a new foundation dedicated to accessible technology. Rowan initially hesitated, but Adrian told him the offer was not charity. It was an opportunity to help other families discover what Seraphina had discovered. Rowan accepted, but only after Adrian promised that the foundation would listen to disabled children instead of simply deciding what was best for them. Years later, the Veil Foundation became known around the world for developing affordable sensory technology and supporting families who could not afford expensive treatment. Seraphina became one of its youngest ambassadors. She never forgot the afternoon Rowan arrived with an old toolbox and treated her like a person instead of a problem. And Adrian never forgot what his daughter taught him. Money could build walls. Money could buy the finest doctors. Money could create beautiful gardens. But kindness could open a door that wealth never could. One bright afternoon, Seraphina stood beneath the same oak tree where she had once cried because she believed she was broken. She closed her eyes and felt the warm wind move across her face. Somewhere nearby, birds were singing. She could not hear their song the way most people did, but she smiled anyway because she had learned something far more important. The world did not have to sound a certain way to be beautiful. Sometimes beauty was a father's hand holding yours. Sometimes it was a boy laughing beside you. Sometimes it was a stranger arriving with nothing but a toolbox and enough kindness to stay. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub for more emotional stories that remind us that one small act of kindness can change an entire life. And before you leave, comment, "Kindness changes everything," if you believe that every person deserves to be seen, understood, and given a chance. Because sometimes the person who changes your life does not arrive in a limousine. Sometimes they arrive in an old gray van, carrying a worn-out toolbox, and unknowingly bring you the first glimpse of a world you thought you would never experience.